Hey there, BKFK listeners. We have a super exciting invitation just for you. Want to peek behind the curtain of all the fun we create? Head over to our website and sign up for our awesome newsletter. You'll get the scoop on behind-the-scenes facts, the latest BKFK news, and details about our upcoming stories. You'll also get to meet our amazing performers in our BKFK Hall of Fame. Plus, we've got some cool giveaways lined up just for you. To kick things off, we're giving away a free copy of our audiobook, The House at Pooh Corner, to all new subscribers. That's right, the whole book. So don't miss out. Zoom on over to buykids4kids.co. Sign up and join the fun with the BKFK family. Hello, kids. We at BKFK are taking a much-needed break, but that doesn't mean we don't have a story for you this week. I'm sure you know by now that we produce extra stories for our Patreon subscribers. Without them, we couldn't possibly produce the show, so we try and make a little something extra for them. We thought we'd share one of these stories with you. So let's hear it from a much younger Ruby.
Jorinda and Jorindel. There was once an old castle that stood in the middle of a deep, gloomy forest. And in the castle lived an old fairy. Now this fairy could take any shape she pleased. During the day she flew about in the form of an owl, or crept about like a cat. But at night she always took the form of an old woman. When any young man came within 100 paces of her castle, he became paralyzed, stuck in place, and could not move a step till she came and set him free. Which she would not do till he had given her his word never to come there again. But when any woman came within that space, she was changed into a bird. And the fairy put her into a cage and hung her up in a chamber in the castle. There were 700 of these cages hanging in the castle, and all with beautiful birds trapped in them. Now there was once a maiden whose name was Jorinda, and a shepherd lad whose name was Jorindel, who was very fond of her, and they were soon to be married. One day they went to walk in the forest, and Jorindel said,
"We must take care that we don't go too near to the fairy's castle."
It was a beautiful evening. The last rays of the setting sun shone bright through the long stems of the trees, and the turtle doves sang from the tall birches. Jorinda sat down to gaze upon the sun. Jorindel sat by her side. They both felt sad, but they didn't know why. But it seemed as if they were to be parted from one another forever. They had wandered a long way, and when they looked to see which way they should go home, they found themselves at a loss to know what path to take. The sun was setting fast, and already half of it had sunk behind the hill. Jorindel suddenly saw through the bushes that they had, without knowing it, sat down close to the old walls of the castle. Then he shrank for fear, turned pale and trembled. Jorinda was singing a beautiful song when her song stopped suddenly. Jorindel turned to see the reason and saw that Jorinda had changed into a nightingale. An owl with fiery eyes flew 3 times round them and hooted 3 times. Jorindel could not move. He stood fixed as stone, completely paralyzed. Soon the sun went quite down and the gloomy night came. The owl flew into a bush, and a moment later the old fairy came forward with glaring eyes. She mumbled something to herself, seized the nightingale, and went away with it in her hand. Poor Jorindel saw the nightingale was gone, but what could he do? He could not speak and could not move from the spot where he stood. Soon the fairy came back. Suddenly Jorindel found himself free. and then he fell on his knees before the fairy and begged her.
Please give me back my dear Jorinda.
But she laughed at him and said,
You will never see her again. Ever!
Then she went her way. He prayed, he wept, he sorrowed, but all in vain.
Alas,
He said,
what will become of my poor Jorinda?
he camped under the trees, a bit more than 100 paces from the castle, and spent a night wondering how he could rescue Jorinda. Soon he fell asleep. He had a strange dream in which he found a beautiful purple flower, and that in the middle of it lay a precious pearl. And he dreamt that he plucked the flower and went with it in his hands into the castle, and that everything he touched with it was disenchanted, and that there he found his Jorinda again. In the morning when he awoke, he began to search everywhere for this pretty flower. He looked under the trees,
No,
behind rocks, on the top of mountains,
nothing.
and everywhere that he could imagine. He was tireless in his search. And then, early one morning, just as he was about to lose hope, he found the beautiful purple flower, and in the middle of it was a large dewdrop as big as a pearl. Then he plucked the flower and set out and traveled day and night until he came to the castle. He walked nearer than 100 paces to it, and yet he did not become paralyzed as before. The flower was protecting him. He tiptoed right up to the door. Nothing happened. Then he touched the door with the flower, and it sprang open. He walked inside and was instantly almost deafened by the song of hundreds of birds. At last, he came to the chamber where the fairy sat, with her back to the door, with 700 birds singing in 700 cages. She turned when she heard the door open. When she saw Jorindel, she was very angry and screamed with rage. She ran towards him, muttering evil-sounding words, preparing to destroy him with her dreadful magic. But she could not come within 2 yards of him because the flower he held in his hand was keeping him safe. He looked around at the birds, but alas, there were many, many nightingales.
How can I find which one is Jorinda?
He wondered. While he was thinking what to do, he saw the fairy had taken down one of the cages and was running for the door.
You'll never free her!
She screamed. But Jorindel was too fast for her. He sprinted after her and tripped her before she could reach the door. She fell with a cry, clutching her leg while the cage clattered to the ground. The fairy staggered up and lunged for Jorindel, but he thrust the flower towards her. The moment she touched it, the fairy turned into a bird. But not a nightingale, no. She turned into a big fat chicken that was desperately flapping its wings. Jorindel gently picked up the cage, touched it with the flower, and with a magical swish, Jorinda stood before him. She threw her arms around his neck and cried,
My darling Jorindel, I knew you would come.
Then he touched all the other birds with the flower, so that they all took their old forms again. And there was soon an excited chattering of hundreds of happy women, now free from the fairy's curse. Jorindel and Jorinda went home where they were married and lived happily together many years. The fairy spent the rest of her years miserably roaming the castle grounds in the form of a chicken, clucking indignantly and rummaging around the garden for worms and snails to eat.
Quiz time. What happened to the young men who came near the fairies' castle? A. They turned into birds. B. They fell asleep. C. They became paralyzed. Or D. They turned to stone. And the answer is C. They became paralyzed. Question 2. What happened to the woman who came near the castle? A. They turned into statues. B. They fell into a deep sleep. C. They were turned into birds. Or D. They became invisible. And the answer is C. They were turned into birds. Question 3. What were the names of the young couple in the story? A. Hansel and Gretel. B. Jorinda and Jorindel. C. Jack and Jill. Or D. Tom and Jerry. And the answer is B. Jorinda and Jorindel. Question 4. What did Jorindel find in his dream that could save Jorinda? A. A magic wand. B. A golden key. C. A purple flower with a pearl. Or D. A silver sword. And the answer is C. A purple flower with a pearl. Question 5. What did the fairy turn into when Jorindel touched her with the flower? A. A nightingale. B. A cat. C. A chicken. Or D. An owl. And the answer is C. A chicken. Hey guys, if you like this episode, please share it with your friends and family. It is one of the best ways to support BKFK Storytime.